Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're asking this court to grant you more time with a child you can barely afford to feed? The words hang in the air like a verdict already rendered. Courtroom 4B, Ardmore County Family Court, Georgia. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional gray that makes hope feel naive. The woman standing alone at the respondent's podium doesn't flinch. Her hands rest flat on the wooden surface, palms down, fingers still. No trembling, no fidgeting, just the kind of stillness that comes from standing in rooms far more dangerous than this one, before people far more powerful than this man. She wears a simple white blouse, black slacks, no jewelry. The kind of outfit that says nothing and everything at once. The kind of outfit a judge like Preston Calloway sees and immediately categorizes: struggling, desperate, unfit. He doesn't know that in 16 hours, he'll watch her take the oath of office as district attorney. He doesn't know that every word he speaks today is being recorded in her memory, like evidence for a case she's been building her entire life. He doesn't know that the woman he just called too poor to feed her own child once sent 3 federal judges to prison for corruption. But he will. The court reporter's fingers pause over the keys. The bailiff by the door shifts his weight. Even the air seems to hold its breath, waiting for what comes next. Your Honor? Her voice is quiet, level. The voice of someone who learned long ago that volume is the weapon of the weak. I'm asking this court to consider the best interests of my son as required by Georgia Code Section 1993. Calloway's lip curls. His reading glasses catch the light as he leans forward, and for a moment, the Gucci logo on his belt buckle flashes like a warning sign. Don't lecture me about the law, Ms. Adair. I've been practicing law since before you were born. Behind her, in the gallery's back row, an 11-year-old boy watches his mother stand alone against a system designed to break her. He doesn't understand yet what he's witnessing, but he will. They all will. If you've ever been dismissed by someone who didn't know who they were dealing with, hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started. 3 hours earlier, the apartment was quiet, except for the sound of an iron pressing cotton. Simone Adair stood at the ironing board in her small kitchen, working the creases out of her white blouse with the precision of someone who understood that details matter. Every fold exact, every movement deliberate, the kind of care that comes from years of preparing for moments when appearance is the first battlefield. The clock on the microwave read 6:47 a.m. Court was at 2:00 p.m., 7 hours away. Most people would call that excessive preparation time. Simone called it standard operating procedure. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her mother. "Praying for you today, baby. Your father would be proud." She didn't respond. Not because she didn't want to, but because some things were too heavy to carry into the day ahead. James Adair had been dead for 3 years now, killed slowly by the chemicals he'd been exposed to at the DuPont plant in 1989. The same plant that had paid his family a settlement worth less than 1 year of a corporate lawyer's salary. He would have understood what she was doing today. He would have called her crazy for representing herself. He would have done the exact same thing. "Mom?" Dante stood in the doorway of his bedroom, already dressed in the clothes she'd laid out the night before: khaki pants, blue button-down, the shoes she'd polished until they reflected light. 11 years old, going on 40, with his father's eyes and his grandmother's stubborn chin. "You should be sleeping." "Can't." He walked to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, sat down with the careful movements of a child who'd learned too young that some mornings are heavier than others. "Are you scared?" Simone set down the iron, turned to face her son. This was the moment she'd been preparing for since she found out about today's hearing. Not the legal arguments, not the procedural knowledge, but this. The conversation that would shape how her child understood justice. "There are things more important than winning, Dante." She pulled out the chair across from him, sat down at his level. "Sometimes you have to let people show you exactly who they are, even when it hurts." "That doesn't make sense." "It will. Someday. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. Whatever happens in that courtroom today, I need you to remember something. Don't speak. Don't stand up. Don't cry in front of them. Why? Because they'll use it against us. Because tears are ammunition in this system. Because I need you to see that strength isn't about fighting. It's about surviving long enough for the truth to matter. Because I asked you to trust me. Dante held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, Mom. The apartment fell quiet again. Outside, the sun was just starting to rise over Ardmore County, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost mocking in their beauty. Somewhere out there, Judge Preston Calloway was probably finishing his morning coffee, reviewing his docket, deciding which families to tear apart before lunch. He had no idea what was coming. The Ardmore County Courthouse sat on a low hill at the edge of downtown, its 1960s architecture all gray concrete and dirty windows. The Georgia flag flew alongside the American flag at the entrance, both snapping in the November wind, like they were trying to get someone's attention. Simone parked her Honda Accord in the far corner of the lot, not because she didn't have a better car, but because she knew exactly what kind of vehicle would be noticed in a place like this. The Mercedes she'd bought with her federal signing bonus sat in her garage at home. Today wasn't about impressing anyone. Today was about being underestimated. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment, watching the building through her windshield, counting security cameras, noting entry points, mapping the terrain the way she'd been trained to do in situations far more dangerous than a custody hearing. Old habits. The kind that keep you alive. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a calendar reminder. 2:00 p.m. Hearing. Case 24 FC 0972. Adair v. Adair. She dismissed it, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, took a breath. Then she got out of the car and walked toward the building where everything was about to change. The security checkpoint inside the courthouse was staffed by 2 deputies who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The line moved slowly, lawyers with briefcases, anxious parents clutching paperwork, a few people who seemed to have wandered in by accident and now couldn't find their way out. Simone waited her turn. When she reached the front, she placed her purse in the plastic bin, stepped through the metal detector, and reached for her belongings. The deputy on the other side, a thick-necked man whose name tag read Stokes, didn't hand them back. "What's this?" He held up her small notebook, flipping through the pages like he had every right to read her private thoughts. "Personal notes." "Notes about what?" "For my case." Stokes looked at her. Really looked at her. His eyes traveled from her face to her clothes to her sensible shoes and back again, conducting the kind of assessment that had nothing to do with security and everything to do with determining whether she was worth his time. She'd seen that look before, on border agents who pulled her aside for random checks, on cops who needed to verify she actually owned her car, on judges who'd decided her guilt before she'd spoken a word. "You a lawyer?" "I'm representing myself." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. Or contempt. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. "Good luck with that." He dropped her purse on the counter, not handed it to her, dropped it, and turned to the next person in line. Simone collected her belongings without comment, made a mental note. Stokes, security, possible problem. The elevator to the second floor was slow and crowded. She stood in the back corner, watching the numbers climb, listening to fragments of conversation around her. "Judge is always late." "My lawyer says we don't have a chance, but $300 an hour, and this is what I get." The doors opened. Simone stepped out into the hallway that would become a crime scene in approximately 4 hours. She didn't know that yet, but she would. Chapter 2. The second-floor clerk's office was protected by a wall of bulletproof glass, as if the people working behind it were in constant danger from the desperate souls seeking their help. A woman sat at the main window, her red-painted nails clicking against a keyboard with the enthusiasm of someone counting down the minutes until her break. Her name tag read, Odette Ramsey. Simone approached the window. Case number 24 FC 0972, Adair versus Adair. 2 o'clock hearing. Ramsey didn't look up. Case number again? Simone repeated it. Slower this time, enunciating each digit like she was speaking to someone who'd never encountered numbers before. This got a reaction. Ramsey's eyes lifted from the screen, traveled over Simone with the kind of lazy assessment that somehow managed to feel like a full-body pat-down. You're the ex-wife. I'm the petitioner. Same thing. Ramsey's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She turned to the woman at the next desk. Della, she's here. The one I told you about. Della, older, grayer, somehow even less interested, glanced over. The one without a lawyer? That's her. Wants 50% custody. Both women laughed. The sound echoed off the bulletproof glass like a prophecy. Ramsey slid a stack of papers through the slot under the window. Not handed, pushed through so they scattered slightly on Simone's side, forcing her to gather them up. Fill these out. Sit down. Don't bother anyone. Simone collected the papers, noted the form numbers, the filing deadlines, the small print that most people didn't bother to read. She'd read every word. She'd read the precedents those words were based on. She'd read the judicial opinions that had interpreted those precedents, going back decades. But today, she said nothing. She took her papers and walked to the waiting area. The chairs were blue plastic, bolted to the floor in rows. The walls were painted a shade of cream that had yellowed with age. A clock hung crookedly near the water fountain, running 3 minutes slow. Simone chose a seat in the corner, where she could see both the main entrance and the side door that led to the courtrooms. Strategic positioning. Always know your exits. Her mother arrived with Dante at 1:15. Lenora Adair was 67 years old, with silver-streaked hair and hands that had worked 2 jobs for 30 years to put her daughter through law school. She walked with the slight limp she'd developed after the car accident in 2019, an accident caused by a driver who'd been texting, who'd served exactly 0 days in jail for putting a grandmother in the hospital for 3 weeks. You sure about this? Lenora sat down beside her daughter, keeping her voice low. I can still call Jerome. He owes me a favor from... No lawyers, Mama. Simone. I need them to see me the way they want to see me. Just for today. Lenora was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly, the way she'd nodded when Simone had told her she was taking the federal prosecutor job in Washington. The way she'd nodded when Simone had told her she was running for district attorney of a county where no black woman had ever held the office. The way she nodded when she knew her daughter had made a decision that couldn't be changed. Your father would say you're crazy. Dad would have done the same thing. That's what worries me. Dante sat on Simone's other side, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. 11 years old and already learning that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. Mom, why does that man keep staring at us? Simone followed her son's gaze. Across the waiting area, a bailiff was watching them. Big man, thick shoulders, the same one from the security checkpoint. Stokes. Their eyes met. He didn't look away. Neither did she. He's just doing his job, baby. His job is to stare at people? Yes, Simone thought. That's exactly what his job is. To watch, to categorize, to decide who belongs and who doesn't, based on criteria that have nothing to do with law and everything to do with the color of their skin. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she put her arm around her son and waited for her name to be called. At 1:47 p.m., the doors to courtroom 4B opened. Stokes stood at the entrance like a sentry, his bulk blocking most of the doorway. As Simone approached, he held up one meaty hand. Purse, open it. I went through security downstairs. This courtroom has its own rules. His eyes were flat, unreadable, the eyes of someone who'd learned that rules were for other people. Open it or don't come in." Simone looked at him, at his badge, at the gun on his hip, at the way his hand rested near it like a promise of violence waiting to be kept. She opened her purse. Stokes took his time. His fingers moved through her belongings with unnecessary thoroughness, touching her wallet, her keys, her lip balm, her notebook, lingering on that notebook like it contained secrets worth discovering. "What are all these notes?" "Research for my case." "Research?" He said the word like it was a joke. "You do a lot of research, huh?" "Enough." He stared at her for another moment, then stepped aside just enough for her to squeeze past, their shoulders nearly touching as she entered the courtroom. "Good luck in there." His voice followed her inside. "You're going to need it." Courtroom 4B was smaller than Simone had expected. 3 rows of gallery seating, a single aisle down the middle, the judge's bench elevated on a platform that added an extra 2 feet of psychological advantage. The Georgia state seal hung on the wall behind it, flanked by American and state flags. 2 tables faced the bench, one for the petitioner, one for the respondent. In this case, Simone was technically the petitioner, seeking modification of the custody agreement, but in practice, she was the defendant, the one who had to prove she deserved more time with her own child. The opposing table was already occupied. Thorne Beckett sat with the relaxed posture of a man who'd never lost a case he cared about winning. Late 40s, gray 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Simone's car payment. Rolex catching the fluorescent light every time he moved his wrist. He was reviewing documents with the kind of casual confidence that came from knowing the judge, the clerk, and the bailiff by first name. Beside him sat Kevin Adair. Simone's ex-husband looked up as she entered. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or discomfort. Hard to tell with Kevin. He'd always been good at hiding what he really felt. They'd been married for 7 years. Together for 10. She'd met him at Howard, where he'd been studying business, and she'd been in her first year of law school. He'd seemed like everything she wanted then. Ambitious, educated, supportive of her career. What she hadn't realized was that support has conditions. That ambitious sometimes means willing to take shortcuts. That educated doesn't mean ethical. The divorce had been finalized 18 months ago. The custody battle had started immediately after, and somehow, despite everything, Kevin had won primary custody of their son. Despite the fact that he traveled 3 weeks out of every month, despite the fact that Dante spent more time with the nanny than with his father, despite the fact that she'd been the one who took him to doctor's appointments, helped with homework, sat beside his bed when he had nightmares. None of that had mattered. What had mattered was that Kevin could afford Thorne Beckett, and Simone, still paying off student loans, still building her private practice, couldn't. Until now. But today wasn't about what she could afford. Today was about something else entirely. Simone took her seat at the petitioner's table. Alone. Her folder of documents arranged in front of her. Color-coded tabs aligned precisely. She could feel Beckett's eyes on her, assessing. Dismissing. Let him dismiss, she thought. Let them all dismiss. The side door opened. Judge Preston Calloway entered, his black robes billowing behind him like the wings of something predatory. All rise. Every satisfying. Twist starts with a moment just like this. Underestimation. If you want to see how this unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. Calloway settled into his chair with the air of a man returning to a throne he'd never been forced to defend. 58 years old, silver hair combed back from a face that had settled into permanent expression of bored superiority. His reading glasses hung on a chain around his neck, the expensive kind, with designer frames that caught the light when he moved. Be seated. The courtroom complied. Simone noticed how Beckett barely bent his knees before sitting, as if the instruction applied to everyone except him. Case number 24 FC 0972, Adair v. Adair, custody modification hearing. Calloway looked up from his papers, and his eyes found Simone with the kind of focused attention a cat gives a mouse it's deciding whether to eat or play with. "Ms. Adair, I see you're appearing pro se." "Yes, Your Honor." "You understand that representing yourself in a custody matter puts you at significant disadvantage?" "I understand, Your Honor." "And you wish to proceed anyway?" "I do." Something flickered across his face. Not concern. More like confirmation of a suspicion. He'd already decided what kind of person she was, the kind who couldn't afford help, who would muddle through with internet research and misplaced confidence, who would ultimately fail and probably deserve it. Very well. He turned a page. "You are seeking to modify the current custody arrangement from, let me see, 2 weekends per month of visitation to 50% physical custody?" "Yes, Your Honor. Based on the factors outlined in Georgia Code Section 19-9-3, I believe—" "I'm familiar with the statute, Ms. Adair." The words cut like a blade. "What I'm interested in is your basis for believing this court should upend an arrangement that's been working perfectly well for the past 18 months. Perfectly well. The phrase hung in the air. Toxic. Dante had lost 15 pounds since the divorce. His grades had dropped 20%. He'd started having nightmares again, the ones where he called out for his mother in the dark and no one answered. "Your Honor, I have documentation showing that my son's welfare has declined since the current arrangement began. Medical records indicating missed appointments, school reports showing—" "Do you have an attorney to authenticate those documents?" Simone paused. "I gathered them myself, Your Honor. They're originals from the relevant institutions. Without proper legal authentication, I'm not inclined to accept them as evidence." Calloway was already shaking his head, as if the matter were settled. "Mr. Beckett, does the respondent have any documentation to present?" Beckett rose with the fluid grace of a shark sensing blood. "Yes, Your Honor. We've prepared Exhibit B, a comprehensive psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Harold Ingram." "I haven't received a copy of any psychological evaluation." The words came from Simone before she could stop them. Both men turned to look at her. Calloway with irritation, Beckett with something closer to amusement. "Exhibit B was filed with the court 3 days ago," Beckett said smoothly. "Ms. Adair had full access to the public record." "I wasn't notified of any new filing." Simone looked at the clerk's table, where Odette Ramsey sat with her hands folded and her expression carefully blank. "The court's notification system works perfectly well for those who know how to use it." Calloway's voice carried the particular edge of someone who'd just been given an excuse to be irritated. "Ms. Adair, if you're going to represent yourself, you need to understand that the court doesn't hold your hand. You're responsible for monitoring your own case." "Your Honor, I'm simply requesting the opportunity to review evidence before it's presented against me. That's a basic procedural—" "Are you lecturing me on procedure?" The temperature in the room dropped. Simone could feel every eye on her. The clerks, the bailiffs, her ex-husbands. Even Dante, sitting in the back row with his grandmother, seemed to shrink in his seat. "No, Your Honor. I'm asking for fairness." Calloway leaned back. His chair creaked under his weight, or maybe that was just the sound of any pretense of impartiality finally giving up. "Fairness is what this court provides, Ms. Adair. Now, Mr. Beckett, please present your exhibit." Dr. Harold Ingram's evaluation was 23 pages long. Beckett read the highlights with the rehearsed smoothness of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Mr. Adair provides a stable, structured home environment. The child appears well-adjusted and thriving under the current custody arrangement. Dr. Ingram finds no compelling reason to modify the existing agreement. The words landed like stones, each one building a wall between Simone and her son. "Your Honor, if I may—" "You may not." Calloway didn't even look at her. "Mr. Beckett hasn't finished presenting his evidence." "I simply wanted to ask how many times Dr. Ingram met with my son." The question hung in the air. Beckett's smooth expression flickered, just for a moment, but Simone caught it. She'd spent years learning to read micro-expressions in federal courtrooms. This one said, She wasn't supposed to ask that. The evaluation was comprehensive, Beckett said. That's not what I asked. How many sessions? Ms. Adair, Calloway's voice was a warning. 1 session. She held up the exhibit, scanning the pages she'd just been handed. 90 minutes. Dr. Ingram met with my son exactly once, for 90 minutes, and concluded that he's thriving. Is that accurate? Silence. Mr. Beckett? Beckett glanced at Calloway. Some communication passed between them. Subtle. Practiced. The kind of coordination that only comes from long familiarity. The length of the evaluation is at the doctor's discretion, Your Honor. His credentials are impeccable. I'm not questioning his credentials. Simone kept her voice level. Calm. The voice of someone who had cross-examined senators without breaking a sweat. I'm questioning whether a 90-minute evaluation can accurately assess a child's well-being. Georgia Code Section 19-93, Factor 6, requires the court to consider the mental and physical health of all individuals involved. How can a single 90-minute session... Ms. Adair? Calloway's gavel came down. The crack echoed through the small courtroom like a gunshot. You are not a licensed attorney. You do not get to cross-examine evidence. You get to present your own case, and frankly, I haven't heard anything compelling so far. He leaned forward, and for the first time, Simone saw something in his eyes beyond boredom. It was contempt. The pure, unfiltered contempt of a man who had never been forced to question his own authority. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're asking this court to grant you more time with a child you can barely afford to feed? The words hit her like a physical blow. Behind her, she heard Dante make a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Your Honor, my financial situation is not... Your financial situation is exactly what we're discussing. Calloway pulled out another document. According to records filed with this court, you've been between jobs for the past 6 months? I've been in career transition, unemployed. He said the word like a verdict. And before that, you were what? Some kind of government lawyer? I was a federal prosecutor, Your Honor. Senior Assistant U.S. Attorney, Department of Justice, Criminal Division. Something flickered in Calloway's expression. Surprise, maybe, or disbelief. He glanced at Beckett, who shook his head slightly, a signal that said, "Don't worry, it doesn't matter." Well, Calloway set down the document. Government work doesn't pay very well, does it? Certainly not well enough to provide the kind of stable environment a child needs. From the back of the courtroom, Lenora Adair made a sound of protest. Simone turned slightly, caught her mother's eye, gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Your Honor, I have a position beginning tomorrow, a well-compensated position that will more than meet any financial requirements the court might have. Beginning tomorrow? Calloway's eyebrows rose. You don't currently have a job, but you expect this court to believe you'll have one tomorrow? Yes, Your Honor. And what is this position? Simone paused. This was the moment she'd prepared for, the moment where she could end all of this with 4 simple words. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to let them show exactly who they were, to document every violation, every act of bias, every moment where the system revealed its true face. I'd prefer not to disclose details at this time, Your Honor. Prefer not to... Calloway laughed. Actually laughed. The sound bounced off the walls, ugly and dismissive. Ms. Adair, this is a court of law, not a game show. If you can't prove you have the financial means to care for your child, I have no basis to grant your petition. Your Honor, Georgia law doesn't require me to disclose specific employment details unless ordered by the court. I'm simply asking... Don't tell me what Georgia law requires. His voice was rising now, the pretense of judicial temperament cracking like old paint. I've been interpreting Georgia law for 22 years. I don't need some unemployed... He stopped himself, but not before the word hung in the air, incomplete and damning. Some unemployed what? Simone didn't need him to finish. She knew exactly what word he'd swallowed. She'd heard it before, in different forms, from different mouths. the word that reduced her degrees and accomplishments and years of service to a single, dismissible category. Your Honor. Her voice was steady, calm, the voice of someone who had learned long ago that anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. I'm simply asking for the opportunity to present my case fully before the court makes a decision. That's my right under Georgia law. Calloway stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the clock on the wall. We'll recess for 15 minutes. His gavel came down again, softer this time. Ms. Adair, I suggest you use that time to reconsider whether you really want to proceed with this approach. The hallway outside courtroom 4B was crowded with the afternoon rush of family court, lawyers huddled with clients, parents arguing in hushed voices, children sitting on benches with the glazed expressions of hostages who'd stopped hoping for rescue. Dante found his mother before she'd made it 10 steps from the door, his arms wrapped around her waist, and for a moment she let herself stop being a strategist and just be a mother. He's not being fair. The words came out muffled against her blouse. Why isn't he listening? Sometimes the people who are supposed to be fair aren't, baby. She stroked his hair, careful not to let him see her face. The mask of calm she'd maintained in the courtroom was slipping, and she needed a moment to put it back in place. That's why we document everything. But what if documenting isn't enough? What if he just says no anyway? Over her son's head, Simone met her mother's eyes. Lenora was standing a few feet away, her expression a complicated mixture of pride and worry, and something that might have been fear. Then we appeal, Simone said. And if that doesn't work, we appeal again. And we keep appealing until someone listens. But that could take forever. Sometimes justice takes forever, Dante. That doesn't mean we stop fighting for it. A voice cut through the hallway noise. Not loud, but somehow carrying anyway. Well, well, the welfare queen herself. Simone turned. Odette Ramsey stood by the water fountain, her red-nailed fingers wrapped around a paper cup. 2 other court employees flanked her, the woman called Della, and a younger man whose name tag read Jenkins. I'm sorry? Simone's voice was ice. Just making conversation. Ramsey's smile didn't reach her eyes. You know, I've been working in family court for 16 years. I've seen a lot of people like you come through here. They all think they're special. They all think the rules don't apply to them. Mom, Dante tugged at her hand. Let's just go. Listen to your son, honey. Ramsey took a sip of water, her eyes never leaving Simone's face. Smart kid. Gets it from his daddy, I'm sure. Something hot flared in Simone's chest. The urge to respond, to defend, to unleash the kind of verbal devastation she'd once deployed against defense attorneys who'd made the mistake of underestimating her. But she didn't. Instead, she reached for her notebook, pulled out a pen. What are you doing? Documenting, Simone wrote as she spoke. Date, time, names present. That's what I do, Ms. Ramsey. I document everything. Ramsey's smile faltered. You can't. What are you writing? Your words, your actions, the fact that you called a litigant in an active case a welfare queen in a public hallway. Simone looked up. Would you like to add anything for the record? For a moment, no one moved. Then Ramsey turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the tile floor like a retreat. Della and Jenkins followed, neither looking back. Mom. Dante was staring at her with something new in his eyes. That was dangerous. Lenora's voice was quiet, worried. Simone, these people can make your life very difficult. They already have, Mama. Simone closed her notebook. The question is what we do about it. The recess was supposed to be 15 minutes. It lasted 37. When Judge Calloway finally returned to the bench, his face was flushed and his eyes were harder than before. Something had happened during the break. A phone call, a conversation, a reminder of who he was and what he represented. Be seated. The words came out clipped, irritated. Ms. Adair, Are you prepared to continue? Yes, Your Honor. Then let's finish this. He pulled out her file, scanned it briefly. After reviewing the evidence, or lack thereof, presented today, I'm not inclined to grant your petition for modification. The current arrangement appears to be working adequately, and, Your Honor, I haven't had the opportunity to present my evidence. The interruption landed like a slap. Calloway's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Excuse me? Georgia Code Section 91143 guarantees pro se litigants the right to present evidence and question witnesses. I haven't been allowed to do either. Simone kept her voice steady, but her heart was pounding. This was the moment, the line she'd been waiting for them to cross. You've heard Mr. Beckett's evidence. You've allowed him to present documents and testimony. I'm simply asking for the same opportunity. You're asking. Calloway stopped, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. Ms. Adair, I don't know what courthouse you think you're in, but in my courtroom, I decide what evidence gets presented and when. With respect, Your Honor, that's not how Georgia law works. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the court reporter's fingers stopped moving. Did you just tell me I don't know how the law works? I'm telling you that pro se litigants have protected rights under Georgia statute, and those rights include— I know what they include. Calloway's voice was rising. The vein in his forehead was visible now, pulsing. I don't need some unemployed government bureaucrat lecturing me about procedure. Your Honor, you're simply wasting this court's time. He slammed the file closed. Motion for custody modification is denied. The current arrangement will continue as ordered. This hearing is concluded. His gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo long after the sound had faded. Your Honor, I said concluded, Ms. Adair. He was already gathering his papers, not looking at her. You're free to file an appeal through proper channels. Now, bailiff, please clear the courtroom. We have other matters to attend to. Stokes moved toward them immediately, not toward Beckett's table, not toward the gallery, but directly toward Simone. Time to go. His hand landed on her shoulder, heavy, controlling. Hearing's over. Remove your hand from me. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to— I said remove your hand. The words cut through the room like a blade, not loud, not panicked, just cold, absolute. The voice of someone who had given orders to FBI tactical teams and expected them to be followed. Stokes's hand hesitated. Something in her voice, something in her eyes, made him recalibrate. Ma'am, the judge said to clear the courtroom. He didn't authorize you to put your hands on a litigant who is gathering her belongings in a calm and orderly fashion. Simone picked up her folder, her notebook, her pen, each movement deliberate, controlled. Am I being detained? What? It's a simple question. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? Stokes looked at Calloway. The judge was watching from the bench, his expression unreadable. Let her go. Calloway's voice was flat. She's not worth the paperwork. Simone walked out of the courtroom with her head high and her son's hand in hers. Behind her, she could hear Beckett's low laugh and Calloway's muttered response. She didn't look back, but she remembered everything. The afternoon sun was starting to set as they left the courthouse, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed almost mocking in their beauty. Dante hadn't spoken since they'd left the courtroom. Neither had Lenora. They were almost to the car when a voice called out from behind them. Ms. Adair, a moment. Simone turned. A woman was walking toward them across the parking lot, middle-aged, professional suit, carrying herself with the particular combination of exhaustion and determination that marked career civil servants everywhere. I'm Patricia Holden, Administrative Assistant to Chief Judge Ashford. Simone's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her chest. Chief Judge Loretta Ashford, the woman who would be administering her oath of office tomorrow morning. Ms. Holden, Chief Judge Ashford asked me to confirm your arrival time for tomorrow's ceremony. Holden's eyes flicked to Dante, to Lenora, back to Simone. She mentioned she'd tried calling, but my phone's been off. Simone kept her voice neutral. I've been in court. Yes, I heard. Something passed across Holden's face. Sympathy, maybe, or solidarity. The look of someone who had watched that particular courtroom operate for too long. 9 a.m. tomorrow, the main hall. Chief Judge wanted me to tell you she's looking forward to it. Please tell her I'll be there. Holden nodded. She started to turn away, then paused. Ms. Adair, for what it's worth. She glanced back at the courthouse, at the windows of courtroom 4B visible on the second floor. Some of us have been waiting a long time for someone like you. She walked away before Simone could respond. The drive home was quiet. Dante stared out the window, watching the streets of Ardmore slide past like scenes from someone else's life. Lenora sat in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap, her face carrying the particular stillness of a woman who had learned to grieve in silence. Mom? Simone glanced at her son in the rearview mirror. Yeah, baby? What happens tomorrow? Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. Tomorrow everything changes. How? Simone was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and squeezed her son's hand. You'll see, baby. You'll see. The apartment was dark when they got home. Simone sent Dante to wash up, sent her mother to rest, and sat alone in the kitchen with her laptop open and her mind racing. The video was already online. Someone in the courtroom, probably one of the observers she hadn't noticed, had recorded parts of the hearing and posted it to social media. Black mother denied custody by biased judge was the headline. 47,000 views and climbing. She watched it twice. The quality was poor, the audio muffled, but you could hear the important parts clearly enough. You're asking this court to grant you more time with a child you can barely afford to feed. The comment section was exactly what she expected. Outrage, support, a handful of trolls. The usual mixture of compassion and cruelty that constituted public discourse these days. She closed the video, opened a new document, and began to write. 2. Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission. Formal complaint against Judge Preston Calloway. The words came easily. Years of legal training, years of building cases, years of documenting the powerful's abuse of the powerless. She detailed every violation, the interruptions, the refusal to accept evidence, the discriminatory language, the biased rulings. She was still writing when her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Saw the video. You were brilliant in there. Whatever you're planning, I want to help. MT. MT. The initials didn't mean anything to her, but the message did. Someone was watching. Someone who might be useful. She saved the number, finished her complaint, sent it at 3:17 a.m. to the JQC's official submission portal. Then she closed her laptop, walked to her bedroom, and tried to sleep. Chapter. She dreamed of her father. James Adair stood in his work clothes, the ones he'd worn to the DuPont plant every day for 23 years. His hands were rough, scarred from chemicals he hadn't known were killing him, but his eyes were kind, the way they'd always been, even at the end. You know what you're doing, baby girl? I know, Daddy. They're going to come at you hard. People like that don't lose gracefully. I know. He nodded slowly, reached out. His hand passed through her cheek like smoke. Make them remember your name, Simone. Make them remember that some people can't be dismissed. She woke up with tears on her face and sunlight streaming through the window. It was Friday morning. Time to change everything. Shaka. The bathroom mirror showed a woman she almost didn't recognize. Not the defeated mother from yesterday's courtroom. Not the target of Calloway's contempt and Ramsey's sneers. This was someone else. Someone she'd buried for the past 6 months, waiting for exactly the right moment to emerge. The black suit fit perfectly. The white blouse was crisp, unwrinkled. Her heels added 2 inches of height she didn't need but used anyway, because presence was a weapon, and she'd learned to deploy every weapon she had. From the bottom of her closet, she retrieved a box she hadn't opened in months. Inside, a gold pin in the shape of the scales of justice, a gift from the Attorney General himself after the case that had made her reputation. She pinned it to her lapel, adjusting it until it caught the light. "Mom?" Dante stood in the doorway, still in his pajamas. His eyes were wide, taking in the transformation. "You look different." "Do I?" "You look like you're about to do something important." Simone smiled. For the first time in what felt like weeks, the expression was genuine. "I am, baby. Get dressed. Your grandmother's going to bring you to the courthouse at 9. "I thought the hearing was over." "It is." She crossed to him, knelt so they were eye to eye. "Today isn't about the hearing, Dante. Today is about something much bigger." "What?" She kissed his forehead, stood up. "Today is about justice." Ciao. Some moments change everything that comes after them. If you've made it this far, you're about to witness one of those moments. Stay with me. The Ardmore County Courthouse looked different in the morning light. Not physically different. Same gray concrete, same dirty windows, same flags snapping in the November wind. But the energy was different. Yesterday had been chaos and desperation, families fighting for scraps of time with their own children. Today was ceremony. Today was power changing hands. Simone entered through the back door, following the security escort that had been waiting for her since 8:30. They'd offered her coffee, water, anything she needed. They'd called her ma'am and Ms. Adair, with the particular deference that public employees reserve for people they recognize as having authority. Yesterday, Stokes had made her open her purse like a suspected criminal. Today, the same man stood at attention as she passed, his face carefully blank. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't need to. Check. The main hall of the Ardmore County Courthouse had been transformed. 200 chairs arranged in neat rows facing a raised platform where the Georgia and American flags flanked a wooden podium. Press cameras lined the back wall. Local politicians clustered near the front, their smiles already rehearsed for the photographs. And in the second row, front center, Dante, sitting between his grandmother and his father. Kevin had come. Of course he had. Kevin always showed up when there were cameras present. His suit was perfectly tailored, his expression carefully supportive, as if yesterday's courtroom hadn't happened at all. Simone felt nothing when she saw him. Not anger, not sadness, just the particular emptiness that comes from having grieved a relationship so thoroughly that even its corpse no longer bothered her. Dante caught her eye, waved. She smiled back, a real smile, the kind she'd been saving for exactly this moment. "Ms. Adair?" An aide touched her elbow. "Chief Judge Ashford would like to see you before the ceremony." Chief Judge Loretta Ashford's chambers were on the 3rd floor, in a corner office that Simone had never been allowed to approach yesterday. The door was open. Inside, a woman in her 60s sat behind a desk covered in law books and family photographs. Silver-streaked hair pulled back from a face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. Simone Adair. Ashford stood. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp. Or should I say, Madam District Attorney. Not yet. In about 20 minutes, though. Ashford gestured to a chair. "Sit. We should talk." Simone sat. The leather was soft, expensive. The kind of chair that people underestimated. The kind that cradled you while important things were decided. "I read your complaint." Ashford pulled a document from her desk. 3 a.m. is an interesting time to file with the JQC. I had a lot to say. Clearly. Ashford set the complaint down. I also watched the video. It's been viewed 200,000 times since midnight. 200,000. The number landed like a verdict. I wasn't aware it had spread that far. These things have a way of moving fast. Ashford leaned back. Preston Calloway has been on my bench for 22 years. He was appointed by Governor Barnes, re-elected twice, never faced a serious challenger. She paused. He's also been the subject of 14 complaints to the JQC in the past decade. None of them resulted in action. Why not? Because the system protects its own. Ashford's voice was matter-of-fact, not bitter, just honest. You know that as well as anyone. Federal prosecutor for 11 years. You've seen how institutions cover for their worst members. I have. So you know what you're walking into. Ashford stood, moved to the window. Outside, the November sun was bright, almost cheerful. As district attorney, you'll have authority over every criminal case in this county. That includes cases involving court employees, bailiffs, clerks, even judges under certain circumstances. I'm aware. I'm sure you are. Ashford turned back. Her eyes held something that might have been hope, or warning. Hard to tell sometimes. What I need to know is, what are you planning to do about it? Simone was quiet for a moment. Then she stood, walked to the window, stood beside the woman who would administer her oath in 15 minutes. I'm planning to do my job, Your Honor, whatever that requires. Ashford studied her, then nodded slowly. Good. Let's go swear you in. The walk from Ashford's chambers to the main hall was the longest of Simone's life. Not because she was afraid, not because she doubted what she was about to do, because every step carried the weight of everyone who had been dismissed in that building. Every family who had been torn apart by bias, every mother who had been told she wasn't good enough, every father who had been judged by the color of his skin instead of the content of his character. She carried them all, and in about 10 minutes she would speak for them. The main hall fell silent as Chief Judge Ashford approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to witness the swearing-in of our newly elected district attorney for Ardmore County. In the audience, Judge Preston Calloway sat in the 5th row. Simone hadn't seen him enter. He was leaning toward Thorne Beckett, whispering something that made both men smile. They hadn't looked at the podium yet, hadn't noticed who was waiting in the wings. The district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer of our county. She will oversee all criminal prosecutions, supervise assistant district attorneys, and work closely with this court to ensure justice is served. She. Calloway heard the pronoun. His eyebrows rose slightly. His eyes found the stage and froze. Please welcome our new district attorney, Simone Adair. She walked out from the side entrance, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. The applause started immediately, the polite, automatic applause that greets any new official. But it stuttered, hesitated, as recognition spread through the room. The woman from yesterday, the woman who'd been dismissed, the woman who'd been called too poor to feed her own child, walking toward the oath of office like she'd been born for this moment. In the 5th row, Judge Preston Calloway's face went white. Simone saw it happen, watched the blood drain from his cheeks, watched his hand grip the armrest, watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he'd humiliated, the woman he'd denied justice, the woman he'd thought was powerless, was about to become the most powerful prosecutor in his jurisdiction. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just held his gaze for one long, endless moment. Then she turned to Chief Judge Ashford and placed her hand on the Bible. Do you, Simone Adair, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Georgia, that you will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of District Attorney of Ardmore County to the best of your ability? So help you God? The words echoed through the silent hall. Every camera was focused on her. Every eye was watching. I do. By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, I hereby declare you duly sworn as District Attorney of Ardmore County. Ashford's voice carried a note of something that might have been satisfaction. "Congratulations, Madam District Attorney." The applause was different this time. Louder, more genuine. The sound of people who were starting to understand what they were witnessing. In the second row, Dante was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands had to hurt. Lenora was crying, not bothering to hide it. Even Kevin was applauding, though his expression was complicated in ways Simone didn't have time to analyze. And in the fifth row, Judge Preston Calloway was trying to stand. His legs didn't seem to be working properly. Simone stepped to the podium. "Ciao." "Thank you, Chief Judge Ashford. Thank you all for being here today." Her voice was steady, clear, the voice of someone who had spent years speaking truth to power and learning not to flinch. "Yesterday, I stood in a courtroom in this very building, not as a prosecutor, not as a lawyer, but as a mother, fighting for the right to spend more time with my son." A ripple went through the audience, people leaning forward, cameras zooming in. I was dismissed. I was mocked. I was told that I couldn't afford to feed my own child. Her eyes found Calloway's. He was on his feet now, but he wasn't clapping. He looked like he was trying to find the exit. I was searched in a public hallway while my 11-year-old son watched, all because I didn't look like someone who belonged in the system. The ripple became a murmur. Someone gasped. Someone else started recording on their phone. "But that's exactly why I ran for this office." Simone's voice rose, filling the hall. "Because the system should belong to everyone, not just those who look a certain way, dress a certain way, or know the right people." In the fifth row, Calloway finally made it to the aisle. He was walking toward the back of the room, trying to move casually, but his steps were too fast, too urgent. "As your district attorney, I pledge to pursue justice without bias, to hold the powerful accountable, and to ensure that no one is ever again made to feel less than human in our courts." Calloway reached the door, pushed through it, disappeared. Simone watched him go. Then she turned back to the cameras, to the audience, to her son who was still standing and clapping with tears streaming down his face. "That is my promise to you. That is my promise to my son, and that is my promise to my late father, James Adair, who worked in a factory that slowly killed him because the system decided his life was worth less than their profits." She paused, let the words settle. Justice delayed is not justice denied. It's justice waiting. And today, the wait is over. The applause that followed shook the windows. After the ceremony, the crowd pressed forward, politicians seeking handshakes, reporters shouting questions, well-wishers trying to offer congratulations. Simone navigated it all with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years in the spotlight. But there was only one person she wanted to see. "Mom!" Dante broke through the crowd, throwing himself into her arms with a force that almost knocked her over. "You did it! You actually did it!" "We did it, baby." She held him tight, not caring about the cameras or the watching eyes. "We did it together." Did you see his face? Dante was laughing and crying at the same time. "Judge Calloway, he looked like he was going to throw up." "I saw." "Is he going to be in trouble? For what he did to you?" Simone pulled back slightly, looked into her son's eyes. So much like his father's eyes, but with something different behind them. Something that reminded her of her own father. Something that refused to be broken. "The process is already starting," she said. "There's going to be an investigation. It's going to take time, weeks, maybe months, and we might not get everything we want. But we'll get something? We'll get something." She smoothed his hair the way she'd done when he was small. "The system is slow, Dante, but it can change. We just have to keep pushing." "Mom," his voice dropped. Serious now. "I'm proud of you." For the first time all day, Simone felt her composure slip. Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes, and she didn't bother to blink them away. "I'm proud of you too, baby. Every single day." The crowd had thinned to a handful of officials and press when Simone noticed her. A woman stood near the back wall, away from the cameras. Young, early 30s, professional blazer, sensible shoes, notebook in hand. Her press badge identified her as Mila Tanaka, Ardmore Gazette. Their eyes met across the room. Tanaka held up her phone, showing the text message from last night. MT Simone nodded slightly. A conversation for later. Right now, she had a county to serve. So, that evening, Simone sat in her new office on the 5th floor of the courthouse. The space was larger than any she'd ever worked in. Desk, conference table, wall of law books, window overlooking the town square. On her desk, the case files she'd inherited. 347 active prosecutions, 72 requiring immediate attention. A system that had been running on autopilot for years, making deals with the same defense attorneys, accepting the same outcomes, never questioning whether justice was actually being served. All of that was about to change. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Madam DA, hope you enjoyed your first day. Some of us have long memories. Anonymous. She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Someone was watching. Someone was worried. Good. Let them worry. Midnight. The courthouse was empty except for security. Simone should have gone home hours ago. Dante was waiting. Her mother was worried. Tomorrow would bring 1,000 new challenges. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. She pulled out her laptop, opened a new document, started typing. Pattern analysis. Pro C custody cases. Ardmore County, 2019-2024. If Calloway had treated her that way, he'd treated others the same. There would be a pattern. There always was. She worked until 2 a.m., pulling records, cross-referencing outcomes, building a picture of exactly how broken the system had become. 273 pro-SE custody cases in 5 years. 211 denied. 78%. And almost all of them had been decided by the same judge, Preston Calloway. Outside her window, the town square was dark and quiet. But somewhere out there, in the shadows of streets, she was only beginning to learn, something was moving. A car sat parked across from the courthouse, its headlights off. It had been there for 2 hours. Simone didn't notice it. She was too focused on the numbers, too focused on the pattern that was emerging from the data like a fingerprint at a crime scene. But the car noticed her. The light in her office, the silhouette behind the window, the woman who had just become the most dangerous person in Ardmore County. When she finally turned off her light and left for home, the car started its engine and followed. The headlights appeared in her rearview mirror 3 blocks from the courthouse. Simone noticed them the way she noticed everything, automatically, without conscious thought. 11 years of federal prosecution had taught her to track movement, to catalog details, to never assume coincidence when pattern was possible. The car maintained perfect distance, not close enough to seem threatening, not far enough to lose her at a light. Professional distance, the kind that came from training. She turned left on Maple Street. The car turned left. She turned right on Jefferson. The car turned right. She pulled into a gas station she didn't need, watched in her mirror as the car slowed, then continued past without stopping. Dark sedan. No front plates visible. Windows tinted beyond legal limits. By the time she pulled back onto the road, the car was gone. But she remembered the make, the model, the partial plate she'd glimpsed under a streetlight. Someone was watching. Someone was worried. And that told her everything she needed to know about how close she was to something worth hiding. Doctor. The apartment was dark when she got home. Dante was asleep in his room. She could see the glow of his nightlight under the door. Her mother had left a note on the kitchen counter. Soup in the fridge. Proud of you. Get some rest. Rest. The word felt foreign, like something that belonged to a different life, a different version of herself. She heated the soup without tasting it, sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. The pattern analysis she'd started at the office was still running, pulling records, building connections. 273 cases, 211 denied, 78%. But that was just the surface. The deeper she dug, the worse it got. Of the 62 cases that had been granted, 54 involved petitioners who'd been represented by one of 3 law firms. The same 3 firms that had contributed to Callaway's last re-election campaign. The same 3 firms whose partners played golf with him every Sunday at the Ardmore Country Club. Coincidence was starting to look like conspiracy. Her phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number, MT. Still awake? I have something you need to see. Can meet tomorrow. Name the place. Mila Tanaka, the reporter from the Gazette. Simone stared at the message for a long moment. Reporters were useful. Reporters were also dangerous. They had their own agendas, their own deadlines, their own definitions of what constituted a story worth telling. But right now, she needed allies more than she needed caution. Coffee shop on 5th and Main, 7 a.m. The response came immediately. I'll be there. She dreamed of courtrooms. Not the one from yesterday, something older, darker. A room where the judge's bench stretched so high she couldn't see the face behind it, where the gavel fell like thunder and every crack split the floor wider. She stood at the respondent's table, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood her father, still in his work clothes. Behind her stood hundreds of others, women in simple blouses, men in worn suits, children with wide eyes and trembling hands. All of them waiting, all of them hoping. All of them knowing that hope was a luxury this room didn't offer. The court finds against the petitioner. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Insufficient evidence. Case dismissed. Her father turned to her. His face was younger than she remembered, but his eyes held the same weight. They'll always find a reason to say no, baby girl. That's what systems do. They find reasons. Then how do we win? We don't win. He smiled, sad, tired, knowing. We just keep showing up until they get tired of losing. She woke up with sunlight on her face and her phone alarm screaming. 6:15 a.m. Time to keep showing up. The coffee shop on 5th and Main was the kind of place that had survived gentrification through sheer stubbornness. Mismatched chairs, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration, a jukebox in the corner that only played songs from before Simone was born. Mila Tanaka was already there when she arrived. The reporter sat in a corner booth, laptop open, 3 empty coffee cups pushed to the side. She looked like she hadn't slept. Madam District Attorney. Tanaka stood, offered her hand. Thanks for meeting me. Ms. Tanaka. Simone shook once, firm, sat down across from her. You said you had something I needed to see. I do. Tanaka turned her laptop around. On the screen, a scanned document, faded and slightly blurred. An email, printed from what looked like an old system. I've been investigating family court outcomes in Ardmore County for 8 months. Started as a human interest piece. You know, the struggles of pro se litigants, that kind of thing. But then I started noticing patterns. What kind of patterns? The kind that don't happen by accident. Tanaka scrolled down. Look at this. Email dated 3 years ago, August 15th. I got it from a source inside the court system. Someone who's been sitting on it for years, too scared to come forward. Simone leaned forward, read the words on the screen. From redacted to Preston Callaway. Subject, re-custody case outcomes. Preston, numbers look good this quarter. 17 custody modifications denied. 14 of those pro se petitioners. Keep it up. Appreciates the consistency. The words hit her like ice water. Who sent this? I don't know. The email address belongs to a domain registered to Whitmore & Associates, big family law firm downtown. But when I tried to trace the specific sender, I hit a wall. Tanaka's eyes were bright with the particular intensity of someone who'd found a story worth dying for. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide their identity, which means they knew what they were doing was wrong. Simone sat back. Her mind was racing, making connections. You said 17 denied that quarter, 14 pro-SE. What happened to the other 3? Represented by Whitmore and Associates. Tanaka's smile was grim. Denied anyway. But here's the thing. All 3 of those denials were overturned on appeal, with Whitmore representing them on the appeal. So they lose on purpose in Callaway's court, then win on appeal, and the client pays twice. And Whitmore bills twice, and Callaway keeps his denial rate high, which makes him look tough on frivolous modifications. Tanaka closed the laptop. It's a perfect system. Everyone profits except the families caught in the middle. Simone was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the morning traffic was picking up. People heading to work, to school, to lives that had nothing to do with the corruption rotting at the heart of their justice system. Why bring this to me? Why not just publish? Because I need more than one email to prove a conspiracy. Tanaka leaned forward. And because you're the only person in this county with the power to subpoena records, to compel testimony, to actually do something about it. You know, I can't promise anything. Conflicts of interest. I was just in Callaway's court as a litigant. I know, but you can refer the investigation to the state AG. You can request a special prosecutor. You can make sure this doesn't just disappear into the same system that created it. Simone looked at the reporter. Young, idealistic. The kind of person who still believed that truth was enough to change things. She'd been that person once. Before federal courtrooms had taught her that truth was just the beginning of a very long fight. Send me everything you have, encrypted. I'll review it tonight. Tanaka's face lit up.
I'll review it. That's all I'm promising. Simone stood, dropped a 10 on the table for coffee she hadn't ordered. And Miss Tanaka, be careful. If what you're describing is real, the people involved have a lot to lose. That makes them dangerous. I can handle dangerous. I'm sure you can. But handle it carefully anyway. She left the coffee shop with the weight of the email pressing down on her shoulders. Appreciates the consistency. Someone had written those words. Someone with power. Someone who thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. If you think you know where this is going, think again. The conspiracy runs deeper than anyone imagined, and the real battle is just beginning.
Check. The Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission met in Atlanta, in a building that looked like every other government building in the state. Gray, utilitarian, designed to inspire exactly nothing except a vague sense of bureaucratic inevitability. Simone wasn't there for the preliminary hearing. Couldn't be there, given her status as both the complainant and the new DA with potential oversight of related matters. But she had sources, eyes in the room, people who owed her favors from her federal days. The hearing began at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, 72 hours after her swearing-in ceremony. Judge Preston Callaway arrived with Thorne Beckett at his side, not as a friend now, but as counsel. The same man who'd argued against Simone in custody court was now defending the judge who'd ruled against her. The conflict of interest was so blatant it almost seemed intentional. A message: we protect our own. The panel consisted of 4 members, 2 judges, 1 lawyer, 1 public representative. Panel Chair Morrison was a retired appellate judge with a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsessive. He'd reviewed every complaint against a sitting judge in Georgia for the past 15 years. He'd also never recommended removal. Not once. But he'd never had a case like this. The first witness was Detective Angela Rivera, Internal Affairs. She'd been assigned to review Bailiff Stokes's conduct after Simone's complaint reached the sheriff's department. Her testimony was clinical, precise, devastating. Bailiff Stokes conducted an unauthorized search of a litigant in a public hallway in the presence of a minor child, without documented justification. And what documentation did he provide after the fact? A security incident report filed at 6:47 p.m., approximately 2 hours after the search occurred. The report states, and I quote, "Searched individual based on anonymous tip. No contraband found. No further action." Was this report filed according to department protocol? No, sir. Protocol requires security reports to be filed within 30 minutes of any incident involving physical contact with a member of the public. The report should have included witness signatures, supervisor approval, and specific documentation of the threat that justified the search. None of those elements were present. The panel exchanged glances. Morrison made a note. Detective Rivera, in your professional opinion, was this search justified? No, sir. Based on my review of the evidence, the search appears to have been conducted without legal basis and in violation of department policy. Beckett rose. Objection. Detective Rivera is not qualified to render legal opinions. This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Beckett. Morrison's voice was dry. Save your objections for someone who's impressed by them. The second witness was Deputy Colby Wren. He was younger than Stokes, late 20s, the kind of fresh-faced earnestness that hadn't yet been ground down by the system. He sat in the witness chair with his hands clasped between his knees, not meeting anyone's eyes. Deputy Wren, did you file the security report that led to Ms. Adair's search? I mentioned something to Bailiff Stokes. Mentioned what, exactly? A long pause. Wren's eyes flickered to the back of the room where Calloway sat watching. That maybe someone should check on her, keep an eye on her. Why? Another pause, longer this time. Deputy Wren, I'll remind you that you're under oath. Mr. Beckett said... Wren swallowed. His voice dropped. He said she was causing trouble for Judge Calloway, that she didn't belong there, that maybe someone should remind her of that. The room went very still. Mr. Beckett told you this? Attorney Thorne Beckett? Yes, sir. And what did you understand him to mean by remind her? I don't know. I thought he wanted someone to watch her, make sure she didn't cause any more problems. So you passed this information to Bailiff Stokes? Yes, sir. And approximately 90 minutes later, Ms. Adair was searched in a public hallway in front of her 11-year-old son. Wren's head dropped. Yes, sir. Morrison turned to look at Beckett. The attorney's face had gone the color of old paper. Mr. Beckett, you are not under oath today, but I'm putting you on notice that your conduct in this matter may be referred to the State Bar for investigation. I advise you to consider your position carefully. Beckett didn't respond, didn't move, just sat there, frozen, as the implications settled around him like a net. The third witness was supposed to be Judge Calloway himself. But when Morrison called his name, something unexpected happened. Calloway stood, straightened his tie, looked at the panel with the kind of dignity that comes from knowing you've already lost. Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, I'd like to make a statement. Morrison raised an eyebrow. This is a preliminary hearing, Judge Calloway. Statements are typically reserved for... I understand, but I believe the panel should hear what I have to say. A long pause. Morrison glanced at his colleagues, finally nodded. Very well. Proceed. Calloway took a breath. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, older, stripped of the arrogance that had defined his courtroom presence for 2 decades. I have served on the bench of Ardmore County for 22 years. In that time, I have presided over more than 15,000 cases. I have made rulings that changed lives, sometimes for better, sometimes, I now realize, for worse. He paused, looked down at his hands. The events described in this complaint, I won't pretend they didn't happen. I won't claim that my conduct was justified. What I did in that courtroom, the way I treated Ms. Adair, the things I said, the assumptions I made, was wrong. It was beneath the dignity of the office I hold. The room was absolutely silent. I have spent the past 3 days reviewing my own record, looking at patterns I should have seen years ago, asking myself questions I should have asked long before someone forced me to. He lifted his head, met Morrison's eyes. I am not here to make excuses. I am here to tell this panel that, effective immediately, I am announcing my intention to retire from the bench. A murmur rippled through the room. I will not contest the investigation. I will cooperate fully with any inquiry this commission deems appropriate, and I will spend whatever time remains to me trying to understand how I became the kind of judge I once swore I would never be. He sat down. The silence stretched. Finally, Morrison spoke. Judge Calloway, the commission appreciates your candor. However, a voluntary retirement does not preclude our investigation from continuing. The matters before us today involve potential violations of judicial conduct that may warrant formal censure regardless of your employment status. I understand. Very well. Morrison shuffled his papers. The commission will take a 15-minute recess. When we return, we will hear testimony regarding the courtroom conduct described in the original complaint. The recess lasted 47 minutes. When the panel returned, Morrison's expression had changed. Harder, more focused, like a man who'd just discovered something he wished he hadn't. Before we continue with witness testimony, the commission has received additional evidence that bears on this matter. He held up a folder.
During the recess, we were provided with an email communication dated August 15th, 3 years ago, purportedly sent to Judge Calloway from an unknown party at Whitmore and Associates. Beckett rose immediately. Objection. We've had no opportunity to review. Sit down, Mr. Beckett. Morrison's voice could have frozen water. I told you before, this isn't a courtroom. And given the contents of this email, I'd suggest you start worrying less about your client and more about yourself. He read the email aloud, every word. Preston, numbers look good this quarter. 17 custody modifications denied, 14 of those pro se petitioners. Keep it up. This appreciates the consistency. When he finished, the silence was absolute. Judge Calloway. Morrison's eyes were like stones.
Do you recognize this email? Calloway sat very still. His face had gone gray. Judge Calloway, I asked you a question. I don't recall the specific communication. You don't recall an email that appears to suggest coordination between yourself and a law firm regarding custody case outcomes? I receive many emails. I can't be expected to remember. Let me rephrase. Morrison leaned forward. Are you telling this commission, under oath, that you have never coordinated with any external party regarding the outcomes of cases before your court? The longest pause yet. Beckett whispered something in Calloway's ear. Calloway shook his head. On advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The room erupted. Chapter. The preliminary findings were issued 4 days later. Simone read them in her office, with the door closed and the blinds drawn. The document was 12 pages long, dense with legal language, carefully hedged with qualifications and caveats. But the conclusion was clear. Based on evidence presented, the Judicial Qualifications Commission finds sufficient grounds to proceed with a formal investigation into Judge Preston Calloway for potential violations of Canon 1, Canon 2, and Canon 3B5 of the Georgia Code of Judicial Conduct. Additionally, the Commission is referring evidence of potential criminal conduct to the Georgia Attorney General's Office for further investigation under Georgia Code Section 1610-2, influencing a judicial officer, and Section 1610-93, violation of oath by a public officer. Criminal referral. The word stood out like a beacon. It wasn't conviction. It wasn't even indictment. It was the beginning of a process that would take months, maybe years, to reach any kind of conclusion. But it was something. She kept reading. Bailiff Garrett Stokes is referred to the Ardmore County Sheriff's Department for disciplinary review. Deputy Colby Wren is similarly referred. Attorney Thorne Beckett's conduct has been reported to the Georgia State Bar for potential ethics violations, referred. Reported, Potential. The language of institutions protecting themselves while appearing to act. She'd seen it before, would see it again. It was the way systems worked, slowly, reluctantly, always leaving room for those with power to escape the consequences faced by everyone else. But sometimes, slow was better than nothing. Sometimes the crack in the wall was enough to let the light through. The week that followed was a blur of meetings, briefings, and the 1,000 small crises that came with taking over a prosecutor's office that had been running on autopilot for years. Simone met with her assistant DAs, 17 attorneys of varying experience and commitment, most of whom seemed relieved to finally have leadership that showed up before noon. She reviewed case files, prioritized prosecutions, began the slow work of rebuilding an office that had forgotten what justice was supposed to look like. And every night, she came home to the same apartment, the same son, the same questions that had no easy answers. "Mom, is Judge Calloway going to jail?" Dante asked it over dinner, 3 days after the JQC findings were released. He'd been following the news coverage, impossible not to, when his mother's face was on every local channel. Maybe, probably not. Simone set down her fork. "The investigation is just starting, baby. It's going to take a long time. And even then, the most likely outcome is that he retires quietly and nothing else happens." "But that's not fair." "No, it's not. Then why do we even have laws if people like him can just get away with things?" The question hung in the air. The same question she'd asked herself 1,000 times, in 1,000 different forms, over 20 years of fighting for justice in a system designed to deny it. We have laws because, without them, things would be worse. Much worse. She reached across the table, took his hand. But laws are only as good as the people who enforce them. And for a long time, the people enforcing the laws in Ardmore County didn't care about fairness. They cared about power. And now you're one of those people. Yes. So you can change things. I can try. She squeezed his hand. That's all any of us can do, Dante. Try. Show up. Keep pushing. And hope that eventually the trying adds up to something. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom? Yeah, baby? I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. Like you." Something cracked open in her chest. Pride, fear, love so fierce it almost hurt. "Then you will be, baby. The best one this county's ever seen." Justice isn't a destination. It's a direction. And sometimes the hardest part is keeping your eyes on the road when everyone around you wants you to crash. 2 weeks after the JQC findings, Simone received an unexpected visitor. Kevin Adair stood in her office doorway, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. Gone was the confident businessman who'd sat beside his expensive lawyer while their son's future was decided. In his place was something smaller, something almost human. "Can we talk?" She considered saying no, considered calling security, having him escorted out, adding this intrusion to the long list of grievances she'd been building since the divorce. Instead, she gestured to the chair across from her desk. 5 minutes. He sat down. Didn't speak immediately, just looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "I watched the video, the one from the courtroom." His voice was quiet. "I watched you stand there while Calloway talked to you like you were nothing. And I didn't do anything. I just sat there." "Yes, you did. I should have said something. Should have stood up. Should have what, Kevin? Defended me? Protected me?" She shook her head. "That's not who you are. That's never been who you are." He flinched, but he didn't argue. "I've been thinking. About Dante. About the custody arrangement." He leaned forward. "I want to modify it. In your favor." Whatever Simone had expected, it wasn't this. Why? "Because I watched our son watch his mother be humiliated, and I saw his face, and I realized—" He stopped. swallowed. I realized I've been fighting to keep him away from you for all the wrong reasons. Pride, anger, the need to win, and none of that has anything to do with what's best for him. Kevin, I'm not saying I was wrong about everything. We both made mistakes in the marriage, but the custody fight? He shook his head. That was about hurting you, and Dante was just collateral damage. Simone was quiet for a long moment. Outside her window, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the town square. People going about their lives, unaware of the small earthquake happening in this room. What are you proposing? 50-50. Real shared custody. Week on, week off. No more fighting over holidays. No more using lawyers as weapons. He met her eyes. I'll have my attorney draft the paperwork. You can review it with whoever you want. No pressure, no games, no tricks. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. I haven't given you any reason to. He stood up, moved toward the door. Then paused, looking back. But I'm asking anyway. Because Dante deserves better than what we've been giving him. And maybe this is the first step toward actually giving it to him. He left without waiting for an answer. Simone sat alone in her office, staring at the door he'd closed behind him, trying to figure out what just happened, trying to decide if she believed it. Outside, the shadows kept getting longer. The next morning, she got the call she'd been dreading. Ms. Adair, this is Detective Rivera. I need you to come down to the courthouse. There's been an, incident. What kind of incident? A pause. The security footage from the day of your hearing. The missing 10 minutes. We found them. Simone's heart stopped. Found them where? In the personal cloud storage of Deputy Colby Wren. It appears he backed up the footage before it was deleted from the main server. And Ms. Adair? Rivera's voice dropped. You need to see what's on it. The footage was grainy, shot from a ceiling camera in hallway 2B. Timestamp, 4:42 p.m., the day of Simone's custody hearing. 10 minutes before Stokes ordered her search. Simone watched it in a small room at the sheriff's station, with Rivera beside her and a laptop screen providing the only light. On screen, the hallway was quiet. A few people passing through, lawyers, clerks, the usual courthouse traffic. Then Thorne Beckett appeared. He walked into frame from the left, phone pressed to his ear. Stopped near the water fountain. Started talking. Not loud, but the audio pickup was good enough to catch most of it. She's making him look bad. Asking questions he can't answer. If she keeps this up... A pause. Listening. I know. But we need to do something now, before she gets into the record. Once it's in the record... Another pause. Fine. I'll handle it. But you need to talk to Preston. Make sure he doesn't say anything stupid on the bench. The last thing we need is... Beckett turned. Saw someone approaching. Lowered his voice. I have to go. Just trust me. By the time she leaves this building, she'll wish she'd never walked in. He ended the call. Put the phone in his pocket. Walked toward the courtroom. 3 minutes later, Deputy Wren appeared in the same spot. Stokes joined him. They talked. Brief, urgent, glancing toward the courtroom doors. Then they moved toward where Simone would emerge in approximately 7 minutes. The footage ended. There's more. Rivera reached for the keyboard. Watched the timestamp. She advanced the video. 4:48 p.m. Stokes was standing by the courtroom door now. Wren had disappeared. A figure approached Stokes from off-screen. Male, wearing civilian clothes. They exchanged words. Too quiet for the audio to pick up. The man handed Stokes something small. A piece of paper. Stokes looked at it, nodded. The man walked away. Can you enhance that? Get a face? We tried. The angle's bad and he's wearing a hat. But watch what happens next. The footage jumped forward. 4:51 p.m. Simone emerged from the courtroom, Dante at her side. Stokes moved to intercept. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop right there. The search, the humiliation, The look on Dante's face as he watched his mother treated like a criminal. But this time, Simone wasn't watching herself. She was watching the edges of the frame, the shadows, the spaces between. There, a figure, barely visible at the edge of the camera's range, standing still, watching. "Can you enhance that?" Rivera zoomed in, the image blurred, pixelated, then slowly resolved. Thorne Beckett, standing in the shadows, watching the search he'd orchestrated, making sure it happened exactly the way he'd planned. This changes everything. Simone stood in the sheriff's office an hour later, the footage playing on a loop behind her. Sheriff Margaret Chen sat behind her desk, her expression unreadable. "It changes some things," Chen said carefully, "but not everything. It shows coordination, premeditation. Beckett made a phone call, then Stokes received instructions, then I was searched. That's conspiracy. Maybe. The footage shows a sequence of events. It doesn't prove causation." Chen held up a hand before Simone could argue. "I'm not saying it doesn't look bad. I'm saying a defense attorney will tear it apart. The phone call could have been about anything. The man who approached Stokes could have been anyone. Without testimony connecting the dots, Wren already testified that Beckett told him to remind me I didn't belong there. Wren's testimony is about his conversation with Stokes, not about the man in the footage, not about the phone call." Chen leaned forward. "Look, I want these people held accountable as much as you do, but I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know how these cases fall apart. So what do you suggest? We keep investigating. We find the man in the footage. We get phone records, if we can convince a judge to issue a subpoena. We build the case piece by piece." Chen's eyes were steady, tired. The eyes of someone who had fought this fight before and knew how it usually ended. "And we accept that even if we do everything right, we might still lose." Simone was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then we do everything right. And we don't stop until we've turned over every stone in this county. That's going to make you a lot of enemies." "I already have a lot of enemies." She moved toward the door, paused. "Sheriff Chen, the car that followed me home the night of my swearing in, did you ever identify it?" Chen's expression flickered. "We're working on it. Work faster." She left without looking back. The formal JQC investigation took 4 months. 4 months of depositions, document requests, and the slow grinding of bureaucratic machinery. 4 months of headlines and news coverage, and the constant, exhausting attention of people who wanted her to fail. Simone worked through it all. Prosecuted cases, built her office, showed up every day, did her job, refused to let the investigation become her entire life. But she never stopped pushing. The email trail led to a dead end. The sender at Whitmore and Associates had covered their tracks well. But the pattern analysis she'd started continued to grow, revealing a system of favors and kickbacks that extended far beyond one corrupt judge. 3 other attorneys were referred to the state bar for ethics violations. 2 court employees were fired for destroying evidence. And Bailiff Garrett Stokes, facing mounting pressure from multiple investigations, finally agreed to cooperate. "I didn't know what they were planning. I swear to God, I didn't know." Stokes sat in an interview room at the sheriff's station, his attorney beside him. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 4 months, thinner, grayer, with the hunted expression of a man who'd realized too late what side he'd chosen. "Just tell us what you do know." Detective Rivera sat across from him, recorder running. "Start from the beginning." "Beckett approached me about 6 months before the Adair thing. Said he had clients who needed certain outcomes in family court. Said if I helped make sure things went smoothly, there'd be something in it for me." "What kind of help?" "Little things at first. Making sure certain litigants got delayed at security, losing paperwork, nothing that would leave a trail." He wiped his face with both hands. "Then it escalated. He wanted me to intimidate people, scare them into dropping cases." "And you agreed?" Yeah, I agreed." His voice cracked. The money was good, and I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone. These people were going to lose anyway, right? Calloway always ruled against them. I was just speeding up the process. What about the Adair search? Walk us through that. Beckett called me the morning of the hearing. Said there was a woman coming in, pro se, who was going to cause problems. Said I needed to remind her that she wasn't welcome. He shook his head. I didn't know who she was. I swear. I just thought she was another nobody trying to fight the system. And the man who approached you before the search, who was he? I don't know. He just handed me a note and walked away. The note said to search her. Said there'd been a security complaint. Who wrote the note? I don't know. The handwriting was printed. Could have been anyone. Rivera leaned forward. Mr. Stokes, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you know who was coordinating these activities? Who was at the top? A long pause. Stokes looked at his lawyer. The lawyer nodded slightly. There was someone Beckett reported to, someone at the firm. He never said the name, just called them the partner. Said the partner had connections everywhere, judges, cops, politicians. Said crossing the partner was a death sentence for your career. The partner? That's all you have? That's all I know. I swear to God, that's everything. So, the partner. Simone sat in her office that night, the interview transcript in front of her. The words blurred together, but that phrase kept jumping out. The partner. Someone at Whitmore and Associates. Someone with enough power to coordinate corruption across an entire county's justice system. She pulled up the firm's website. 7 partners listed. 3 senior, 4 junior. All smiling in their professional headshots, all projecting the image of legitimate legal practice. One of them was running a conspiracy. One of them had orchestrated the humiliation of families, the destruction of lives, the systematic denial of justice to anyone who couldn't afford to pay. But which one? Her phone buzzed. A text from Mila Tanaka. Got something. Can't discuss over phone. Same coffee shop tomorrow 6 a.m. Come alone. Simone stared at the message, then typed back, I'll be there. Outside her window, the courthouse stood dark and silent. But somewhere in Ardmore County, someone was watching. Someone was planning. Someone was trying to figure out how to stop her before she got too close. She hoped they were scared. They should be. The coffee shop was empty when she arrived. 5:58 a.m., the sky just starting to lighten in the east. Tanaka was in the same corner booth, but this time she wasn't alone. A man sat across from her, older, black, wearing a suit that had seen better days. His hands were folded on the table, and his eyes were the eyes of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. Madam District Attorney. Tanaka stood. This is Raymond Okonkwo. He was a senior paralegal at Whitmore and Associates until 8 years ago. Okonkwo didn't stand, just nodded slightly, his gaze steady. I've been waiting a long time for someone to come asking the right questions. His voice was deep, resonant, tired. I was starting to think no one ever would. Simone sat down. What kind of questions? Questions about how a respected law firm turned into a machine for destroying families. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a flash drive. I took this when I left. Insurance, in case they ever came after me. 8 years, and I've been too scared to do anything with it. What's on it? Emails, financial records, a database tracking custody case outcomes going back 15 years. He set the drive on the table. And the name of the partner. Simone's heart was pounding. Who? Victoria Whitmore, the founding partner's daughter. She took over the family court division 12 years ago and turned it into a profit center. Everything flows through her, the bribes, the case fixing, the coordination with Calloway. His eyes met hers. She's the one you're looking for. She's the one who's been running this whole operation. Why are you telling me this now, after all these years? Because I watched the video. His voice cracked. I watched that judge talk to you like you were nothing, and I saw your son's face, and I remembered all the other sons and daughters who watched their parents get destroyed by a system Victoria Whitmore created." He pushed the drive toward her. "I'm dying, Ms. Adair. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I'm not going to leave this world with that guilt still on my shoulders." Simone took the drive, held it in her palm like it might explode. "If this is real, if it proves what you're saying, we can bring her down." "It's real. Every word of it." Okonkwo stood slowly, painfully. "But be careful. Victoria Whitmore has been playing this game for 20 years. She knows how to make problems disappear. And right now, you're her biggest problem." He walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Tanaka watched him go, then turned to Simone. "What are you going to do?" Simone looked at the flash drive, at the key to a kingdom built on broken families and stolen futures. "What I always do." She stood. "My job." The investigation accelerated after that. The flash drive contained everything Okonkwo had promised, and more. Financial records showing payments to Calloway's campaign disguised as legal fees. Emails coordinating case outcomes between Whitmore and 3 different judges. A spreadsheet tracking conversion rates for pro-se litigants, as if they were sales leads instead of human beings. Simone referred the entire package to the Georgia Attorney General's office, citing the conflict of interest in investigating matters that touched her own case. A special prosecutor was appointed. Subpoenas were issued. The walls began to close in. 3 months later, Victoria Whitmore was indicted on 47 counts, including conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The trial was scheduled for the following spring. But justice, as Simone had learned, was never simple. The trial was delayed, then delayed again. Whitmore's attorneys filed motion after motion, challenging evidence, questioning jurisdiction, arguing that their client couldn't get a fair trial given the prejudicial media coverage. A year passed. Then another. Dante turned 13, started high school, began spending equal time with both parents. The custody arrangement Kevin had proposed finally formalized by the new judge assigned to their case. Simone was re-elected district attorney with 72% of the vote. Calloway's formal JQC hearing ended with a censure, not removal, not disbarment, just a public reprimand and an agreement that he would never seek judicial office again. He retired to Florida, where he occasionally wrote op-eds about the weaponization of judicial oversight. Stokes pleaded guilty to 1 count of civil rights violation under 18 U.S.C. Sar 242. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, the minimum, and served 11. Beckett was disbarred. He moved to another state and opened a consulting firm that, as far as Simone could tell, did nothing at all. And the car that had followed her home that night? Never identified. The partial plate led to a rental company, which led to a shell corporation, which led to a dead end in Delaware. Some threads never got resolved. Some questions never got answers. That was the reality of fighting a system designed to protect its own. Chucker. The Whitmore trial finally began on a Tuesday in March, 3 years after Simone had stood in Calloway's courtroom and been told she couldn't afford to feed her own child. She wasn't there for the opening arguments. Still too much of a conflict, still too close to the case. But she watched the coverage on her office TV, volume low, while she worked through the daily pile of case files. The prosecution laid out the conspiracy in meticulous detail. The financial records, the emails, the spreadsheet tracking conversion rates. Okonkwo's testimony, delivered via video deposition recorded 2 weeks before he died, his voice steady even as his body failed him. The defense argued that Victoria Whitmore was a successful attorney being targeted for political reasons, that the evidence was circumstantial, the witnesses unreliable, the entire case a witch hunt orchestrated by a district attorney with a personal grudge. The jury deliberated for 6 days. "Ms. Adair, the verdict's in." Simone looked up from her desk. Her assistant stood in the doorway, phone in hand. And? Guilty. 31 counts, including the conspiracy charge. She sat back. Let the words settle. Guilty. Not on everything. 16 counts had been dismissed or reduced. Not enough to undo all the damage. Not enough to give back the years stolen from families who'd trusted a system that betrayed them. But enough. Enough to send a message. Enough to prove that even the powerful could be held accountable if you pushed hard enough and long enough and refused to stop. What's the sentencing recommendation? 15 to 20 years. Judge said she'd issue guidelines next month. 15 to 20 years. Victoria Whitmore would be in her 70s before she saw the outside of a prison. It wasn't perfect justice. It wasn't complete justice. But it was something. That night, Simone sat on her apartment balcony, watching the stars appear one by one over Ardmore County. Dante was inside, doing homework. Lenora had called earlier, crying happy tears at the verdict. Kevin had sent a text. You did it. Proud of you. Strange how things changed. Strange how people changed. Strange how the same system that had tried to destroy her had eventually bent, not broken, just bent, in the direction of something resembling fairness. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mila Tanaka, who had won a state journalism award for her coverage of the Whitmore case. Congratulations, you changed everything. Simone smiled, typed back, Not everything, just enough. She looked up at the stars, thought about her father, who had spent his life fighting a system that killed him anyway. Thought about all the mothers and fathers who had stood where she stood, hoping for justice they never received. She hadn't fixed the system. No one person could. The corruption had roots that went deeper than one law firm, one judge, one county. It would keep growing, keep adapting, keep finding new ways to punish the powerless. But she had proven something. She had proven that showing up mattered, that fighting back mattered, that even when the odds were impossible and the enemies were everywhere, refusing to be dismissed could make a difference. That was what she would teach Dante. What she would teach every young attorney who came through her office. What she would spend the rest of her career demonstrating, case by case, day by day. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a direction. And she was just getting started. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Simone received an unmarked envelope at her home address. No return address, no postmark. Just her name, typed on a plain white label. Inside, a single sheet of paper. A list of names. 6 judges from 3 different counties. A note at the bottom, printed in the same anonymous type. The partner had partners. This isn't over. She stared at the list for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, called Detective Rivera. I need you to run some names for me. And Angela, clear your schedule. We have work to do. Outside her window, the sun was rising over Ardmore County. A new day, a new case, a new fight. She was ready. The list haunted her. 6 names, 3 counties. A conspiracy that made Victoria Whitmore look like a small-time operator. Simone had spent the past year and a half pulling threads, following leads, building a case that stretched across half of Georgia. Every time she thought she'd found the bottom, the floor dropped out and revealed another level of rot beneath. Judge Hammond in Fulton County, Judge Mercer in Clayton, Judge Ashworth, Judge Benitez, Judge Kwan, Judge Thornton, spread across jurisdictions like a disease that had metastasized while no one was paying attention. The anonymous source who'd sent the list never made contact again, but the names checked out. Every single one. Financial irregularities, suspicious ruling patterns, connections to the same network of law firms that had funneled money to Callaway. A system so vast and so entrenched that exposing it felt like trying to empty an ocean with a teaspoon. But Simone had never been afraid of impossible odds. The Georgia Attorney General's office had formed a task force. Simone sat on the advisory board, couldn't lead it, given her history, but could guide it. Could push, could make sure the investigation didn't get buried under political pressure or bureaucratic indifference. The task force had a name now: Operation Clean Bench. 12 investigators, 3 prosecutors, a budget that had been fought for line by line in the state legislature. And enemies. So many enemies. The Judicial Council had pushed back hard against what they called politically motivated attacks on judicial independence. Defense attorneys cried foul, claiming their clients couldn't get fair trials when judges were under investigation. Editorial boards split along predictable lines, some praising the effort, others warning of overreach and witch hunts. Simone ignored all of it. She'd learned long ago that noise was just noise. What mattered was the work. What mattered was showing up, day after day, building the case brick by brick. What mattered was the families who'd been destroyed by a system designed to profit from their suffering. Dante was 15 now. He'd grown 4 inches in the past year, his voice deepening into something that occasionally startled her when he spoke. He was taking AP classes, playing basketball, talking about colleges with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted his future. But he still asked about the case, still wanted to know what was happening, still carried the memory of that day in the courthouse when he'd watched his mother be searched like a criminal while a system built to protect families did nothing. "Mom, are they going to get away with it?" The question came over dinner, a Tuesday night in November. Rain streaked the windows, and the apartment felt smaller than usual, crowded with the weight of everything unsaid. Some of them might. Simone set down her fork. She'd learned not to lie to him about this. He was old enough for truth, even when truth was ugly. That's how the system works, Dante. Not everyone pays, not everyone gets caught. Then what's the point? The point is that some of them will pay, more than would have if no one had tried. She reached across the table, the way she'd done when he was small. And the point is that trying matters, even when you lose, even when the odds are impossible. Because every time someone stands up and says this is wrong, it makes it a little harder for the next person to do something wrong. That's depressing. That's reality. She smiled. But here's the thing about reality, baby. It can change. It has changed. 20 years ago, no one would have believed you could take down a network like this. The power was too entrenched. The system was too protected. And now? Now we've got a task force. We've got indictments. We've got judges resigning before they can be investigated. But you said some of them will get away. Some, not all. She squeezed his hand. And that's progress. Slow, frustrating, incomplete progress. But progress. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, "I still want to be a lawyer." "I know you do, but not like them. Not like the ones who helped Whitmore. Like you." Something cracked open in her chest. The same feeling she'd had when he'd first said those words 3 years ago, in a different apartment, in a different life. "Then you will be, baby. The best one this state's ever seen." The first indictments from Operation Clean Bench came down in December. Judge Hammond, Judge Mercer, 3 attorneys, a court clerk who'd been funneling information to the network for years. Not all 6 judges, not yet. But enough to send a message. Enough to prove that the investigation was real, that the task force had teeth, that the days of untouchable corruption were ending. The press conference was held on the steps of the state capitol, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Attorney General Pauline Reeves stood at the podium, flanked by prosecutors and investigators, announcing charges that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Simone watched from the back of the crowd. Not her spotlight, not her moment, but her work, in every line of the indictment, in every count that would be argued in courts across Georgia. After the press conference, Reeves found her. "You started this." The Attorney General's voice was quiet, meant only for Simone. "Everything we announced today, it traces back to you, to that courtroom, to your refusal to be dismissed. It traces back to a lot of people: Okonkwo, Tanaka, Rivera, everyone who took a risk when they didn't have to. True, but someone had to go first. Reeves held her gaze. You went first. Simone didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just nodded, and watched as the Attorney General walked back to the cameras, to the questions, to the work that remained. The trials took years. Hammond pleaded guilty, cooperated, received a reduced sentence of 7 years. Mercer fought every charge, lost, was sentenced to 12. The others fell somewhere in between, some confessing, some fighting, some disappearing into the machinery of appeals and delays that the system had perfected over centuries. Victoria Whitmore died in prison, 4 years into her sentence. Heart attack. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes, though rumors circulated for months afterward, some claiming she'd been murdered, others claiming she'd been helped to an early grave by people who didn't want her to talk. Simone never found out the truth. Some questions stayed unanswered. Some doors stayed closed. But the system she'd left behind was different. Measurably, provably different. Judicial oversight had been strengthened. Financial disclosure requirements had been tightened. A new commission had been formed to review custody cases going back 20 years, identifying families who might have been victimized by the corruption and offering them a path to reopen their cases. Not perfect, not complete, but different. And different was a start. Chapter 5 years after the Whitmore verdict. Simone stood at the podium in the main hall of the Ardmore County Courthouse, the same hall where she'd been sworn in as district attorney 8 years ago. Today, she was announcing her resignation. It has been the honor of my life to serve the people of Ardmore County. Her voice carried through the crowded room. Reporters, colleagues, the faces of people she'd worked with and fought for, and sometimes fought against. But there comes a time when the best thing a leader can do is step aside and let new voices carry the work forward. In the front row, Dante sat between his grandmother and his father. 20 years old now, finishing his junior year at Howard University. Pre-law, top of his class, already talking about coming back to Georgia, about continuing what his mother had started. I'm not retiring from public service. I'm just changing directions. She smiled. The Attorney General has asked me to lead a new initiative focused on judicial accountability across the state. It's a bigger fight, a harder fight, and it needs someone who's not afraid of impossible odds. Laughter rippled through the room. Everyone knew her reputation by now. Everyone knew what she'd done, what she'd survived, what she'd built from the ashes of a courtroom humiliation that could have destroyed her. So this isn't goodbye. It's just, see you later. She looked at her son, at her mother, at the room full of people who had watched her transform from a target into a force of nature. Because the work isn't done, the system isn't fixed, and as long as there are families being failed by the people who are supposed to protect them, someone needs to keep showing up. She paused. Let the moment settle. I plan to be that someone, for as long as it takes. The applause started slowly, then built, filling the hall like a wave. Simone stood at the podium and let it wash over her, not because she needed the validation, but because she understood what it represented. Hope. Fragile, imperfect, hard-won hope. The most dangerous thing in the world. After the press conference, after the handshakes and the interviews and the well-wishes, Simone found herself alone in her office for the last time. The boxes were packed. The walls were bare. Tomorrow, someone else would sit behind this desk, making decisions that would shape lives and futures and the meaning of justice in Ardmore County. She hoped they were ready. She hoped they understood what the job really meant. Not the power, not the prestige, but the weight. The responsibility. The knowledge that every choice you made rippled outward, touching people you'd never meet, changing stories you'd never hear. A knock at the door. Mom? Dante stood in the doorway, still in his suit from the press conference. He looked so much like his father had at that age, handsome, confident, carrying himself with the easy assurance of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. But his eyes were different. His eyes were hers. "Hey, baby, come in." He walked to the window, looked out at the town square where the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the pavement. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the work not being done." "Yeah?" "When I finish law school, I want to come back here, to Ardmore, to this office." He turned to face her. "I want to continue what you started." Simone felt something shift in her chest. Pride. Fear. The particular ache of watching your child choose a path you know will break their heart, over and over, in ways they can't yet imagine. "It's not an easy job, Dante. It will cost you things you don't want to lose. Relationships, sleep, the ability to believe that the world is fair." "I know. It will make you enemies, powerful enemies, people who will try to destroy you the way they tried to destroy me." "I know. And even if you do everything right, you'll still lose sometimes. You'll watch guilty people walk free. You'll see innocent people suffer. You'll question whether any of it matters." "I know, Mom." He crossed to her, took her hands the way she'd taken his so many times before. "I know all of that. I've watched you live it for 8 years, and I still want to do it, because someone has to, because the alternative is letting them win." She looked at her son, at the man he was becoming, at the lawyer he would be. "Then you will," she said, "and you'll be better at it than I ever was." "I don't know about that." "I do." She pulled him into a hug, holding tight the way she had when he was small, when the world was simpler and the battles were easier. "I raised you. I know exactly what you're capable of." They left the courthouse together, mother and son, walking out into the late afternoon sunlight. The building looked different now than it had 8 years ago. The same gray concrete, the same dirty windows, but something had changed. Something invisible but real, like the air after a storm. People nodded as they passed. Some smiled. A few called out congratulations, good luck, thank you for everything. Simone accepted it all with grace, the way she'd learned to accept both praise and criticism, as data points, nothing more. What mattered wasn't what people said. What mattered was what they did. What mattered was whether the system worked a little better today than it had yesterday, and whether it would work a little better tomorrow than it did today. At the edge of the parking lot, she stopped, turned back to look at the building one last time. 8 years ago, she'd walked into that courthouse as a mother fighting for the right to see her son. She'd been dismissed, mocked, searched in a public hallway while her child watched, and she'd transformed that humiliation into a movement, a reckoning, a fundamental shift in how an entire state thought about justice and accountability and the people who wielded power in their name. Not alone, never alone. She'd had help from reporters and investigators, from allies and witnesses, from the countless ordinary people who'd chosen to stand up when standing up was dangerous. But she'd been the one to go first, the one to refuse to be dismissed, the one to prove that even the most powerful systems could be changed if you were willing to pay the price. "Mom?" Dante was watching her. "You okay?" "Yeah, baby. I'm okay." She smiled. "Just saying goodbye. You'll be back. The new job is statewide, but you'll still be around." "I know, but it won't be the same." She took a breath. Let it out. Nothing ever is. They stood there for another moment, mother and son, looking at the building that had shaped both their lives in ways they were still discovering. Then Simone turned away, walked to her car, got in, and drove toward whatever came next. Mot Num Sao. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Plain white envelope. No return address. Simone's name typed on a label, just like the last one. She opened it carefully, already knowing what she would find. A single sheet of paper. A list of names. Different names this time. Not judges, but legislators. State senators. A congressman. And a note at the bottom, The roots go deeper than you know. But you're getting closer. Keep digging. Simone stared at the paper for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, called a number she'd memorized years ago. Angela? It's Simone. I need you to run some names for me. A pause on the other end. Then Rivera's voice, tired but willing. How many this time? 12. And Angela? Yeah? Clear your calendar. We have work to do. She hung up, looked out her window at the Atlanta skyline, at the city that held so many secrets, so many conspiracies, so many battles waiting to be fought. The roots go deeper than you know. Maybe they did. Maybe this fight would never end. Maybe she would spend the rest of her life pulling at threads, exposing corruption, watching the system repair itself just enough to keep functioning while the rot continued beneath the surface. But that was okay, because justice wasn't a destination. It was a direction, and she knew which way she was walking.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.